When have you witnessed pure evil? There's a family down the way from me. The 13-year-old girl likes to stomp chicks to death. I'm scared for her entering society. I used to live next to the sea when I was a kid. There was this one kid down the road who loved to attack nesting seagulls, grab their eggs and smash them in the car park, then stomp on the bodies. Pure future serial killer. Unfortunately I can't remember what his name was, but I'd love to look him up and see where he ended up. My ex-neighbor. He wasn't drugged out or anything. Someone owed him 20, so he decided to beat him to death with a tomahawk. Even the police had trouble identifying the body. Also, while he was on trial for that, he stabbed another inmate in the eye with a pen. Every word in that first line just gets progressively worse. When I reel the beat, part 1 was like, okay yeah, I mean he might just be ducked in the head and has anger issues. Then the to death, I was like WTF. And then the tomahawk on top of all of it. Somehow each word felt like the last 20 minutes of movie where all of the plot twists are revealing themselves. I saw a man beating what was apparently his 3-year-old granddaughter with basically a tree branch. He was an elderly guy, had to have been 70 or so. This was in the middle of the city. God knows where he even got that thing. This was in Buffalo, New York. Immediately got involved. And I and some bystanders got the cops and they carted the guy away. He was going on and on about how many times he'd been arrested before. Almost bragging. The girl had such sadness in her eyes that it never left me. And when I approached the guy to make him stop, the little girl actually ran up to him and was hugging his leg. She must have been so used to abuse at that point that she didn't recognize how evil this person was. The look in her eyes was heartbreaking. I had gone to that city alone randomly to check it out and see what it had to offer. And that was the first thing I saw upon leaving my car. It broke me, and I just spent the whole night at the hotel. Then just randomly walking the streets. Damn, there are some really cruel people out there. I live in Buffalo, and I'm studying to help abused and mentally ill children. Thank you for stepping in. Most people just turn a blind eye to shit like that. When I worked in a convenience store, I served an elderly lady who had a lot of shopping. She had 2 heavy bags full of food. I packed her bags for her, and a colleague of mine offered to help her take them to her car when she said she didn't have a car and was going home by bus. Then a woman who was standing nearby asked her which bus she was getting, said she was going the same way, and offered to carry her shopping to the bus stop. The elderly lady was happy with this arrangement, thanked the woman profusely, and handed her shopping over. They both left the store together. Then the woman broke into a run and took off with both bags of food, jumping onto a nearby bus and then laughing, giving the finger to the elderly woman, stranded on the pavement as the bus drove away. I have to wonder about the soul of those who willingly take advantage of vulnerable people. My ex-best friend raped his half-sister and convinced all of us he was innocent. He got 3 months weekends in prison. But the evidence was pretty much non-existent, and we all believed that his mom, who already had no contact, she was crazy, basically put her daughter up to it to get back at him for forcing himself back into her life. A few years later, his other sister committed suicide at 14 years old. We cried with him. We went to her funeral. He put the necklace he never took off over her heart as she lied in the open casket. A few weeks later it came out in her diary that he had been raping her all along too. She killed herself because she saw how furious we all were at the people who convicted him and didn't think she would be believed either. I will never understand why that monster decided to put a token in her casket. I realized she is gone, and I don't believe there is anything past death. But I still find it very hard to deal with the fact that she will never escape him. The necklace of her rapist and ultimately her killer will lay over her heart forever. Whenever someone tells you something awful about a person you think is great, don't dismiss it out of hand. Plenty of monsters hide their actions behind closed doors. You never fully know anybody. When I was a teenager, I used to volunteer in the preschool at church. One week I was helping with the 2-year-olds. We had a new girl come in, tiny and adorable. By the end of Sunday school class, all the other kids were terrified of her, with absolutely no expression on her face, and totally silent. She had attempted to strangle a little boy, bit another hard enough to draw blood, smacked a girl across the face, poured her drink out on another, and pinched and kicked me and the other volunteer repeatedly, not to mention dumping her snack on the floor while staring me in the eye, throwing toys in the garbage, and attempting to pull the microwave off the counter. I've dealt with difficult children before, but her totally lack of emotion was very unnerving. I always remember this chilling article from a while ago. Link. I read a book in high school called The Bad Seed. It featured a young girl who was very much like the little girl described above. It really messed with my head for a bit. My sister kicked one of our other sisters in the crotch a few days after she'd had surgery on her abdomen, which resulted in the removal of one of her fallopian tubes and an ovary. Her surgery, not the kick. Worst part is she did this in front of our dad, who kind of told her off. How did she reply? It is what it is. For further clarification, the ages of the two sisters were 25, the kicker, and 18. My father. He was not a good person. My oldest brother, his first son, was quite literally a genius. The sort of kid that ends up in high school before he's a teenager, that graduates college before he can drive a car, and he expected that from the rest of his kids. Everything I was allowed to read was way above my age level. Technical manuals, research papers and case studies, Lord of the Rings, War and Peace, stuff like that. I managed it. Somehow, my sister wasn't so lucky. She struggled a lot, was yelled at because she was a 3-year-old, but couldn't make it through the alphabet by herself. She couldn't add numbers. She couldn't really do anything that was asked of her because she was ducking 3 years old. One day, my father just lost it because she got stuck after the letter E. I tried to help, but was reprimanded for doing so, and finally he just threw her against the wall. He started screaming the alphabet at her, kicking her over and over. He punched her, choked her as he repeated himself over and over. I was frozen in fear. I didn't know what to do. He finally stopped when my mother started coming upstairs. I still remember the look on her face as she picked my sister up and took both of us out of the room. She was never the same after that. The bruises went away eventually, but she started having seizures. She struggled with walking upright on her own, using the bathroom without assistance. Even today, almost 3 decades later, she needs full-time care and can't live a normal life. All because that piece of shit wanted all his kids to be geniuses instead of just one. Oh my god. And he never got in legal trouble for it. How would you explain that to relatives? Kids too scared. Spouse too sad. They didn't explain it to the relatives. Seeing my friend's dad leering at us. He was later convicted of raping her. He'd been doing it since she was 5. The day we got a lurcher puppy into our rescue, he had gotten the living shit kicked out of him and had a broken leg that had been left to heal by itself. His entire paw was bent under his leg, twisted backwards. He was covered in mange, ticks, fleas, and was so skinny I could circle his waist with my hands. His owner demanded him back. Owner was charged with animal abuse, $1,500 fine and a lifetime ban on owning any animals. I heard today he is appealing the decision as he claims he didn't know the pup was so sick. Yeah bud. The leg healed, so it looks like a grasshopper's is totally normal. Pup lived and has been rehomed, but the leg had to be amputated. That bastard better not win his appeal. My brother and his BM rescued a puppy that would constantly run away from his house over to Thiz. One day they finally took him when they saw the owner kick him in the balls as hard as he could. When he grew up and they would walk him if the old owner was outside was the only time I've seen that dog go ballistic. He's very protective and smart, a great buddy to have. He deserves every bit of happiness he has now. This only hit me after the fact. In my teens, one of the guys who was at all the parties was this dude Kyle. He was honestly a great dude. He'd be there to clean stuff up the day after. He'd walk you to the bathroom and hold your hair while you vommed. Solid guy. One morning, I get a call from my friend Kelsey. She said turn on the ducking news. There was Kyle. He had beaten a kid to death with a chain, stole his bank cards and car, and drove around with a kid's body in the trunk for a week before being caught. He was facing the death penalty, but the kid's parents asked for him to get life in prison, no parole instead, which is what he got. He is still a mystery to me. He never once seemed evil to me, but he went and did some ghastly shit nobody expected from him. After yet another argument with my mom over my depression where I tried to explain that my cat's abrupt violent death had left me severely depressed, and she tried to explain to me that cats are furniture and it's impossible to be emotionally attached to pets, she stormed out of my room, went to fetch my last surviving cat, and strangled her in front of me. Once I broke down and tried to claw my poor cat out of her grip, she released the cat with a smirk and proudly announced that she was faking and only pinching the animal's leg to get a reaction out of me. I did a stint in the army in Kosovo in 1999. Where we were based were tons of stray dogs and cats. Some fellow soldiers were finding it fun to throw a puppy out of the top floor window and then proceeded to throw a kitten down a very deep drain and laugh as it meowed. I was literally screaming at them to get it out, but they found this even more funny. The look on one guy's face was just pure evil, as if he lived for my misery. This is a few weeks after splitting with my wife and I received a call from her phone with my 4-year-old daughter bawling her eyes out saying, "Daddy, why don't you love us anymore?" She included my younger son. I got through that call as best I could despite the shock I was in from receiving it. A few weeks later, when I picked my daughter and son up from their mum's house, I asked my daughter why she said that, and her response was that I hadn't picked them up when I should have done, and mummy had told them that I didn't love them anymore. Apparently, the mum had told them I was picking them up on a certain day and had got them ready, with coats and shoes on etc. But I clearly hadn't arrived. I can't imagine the amount of stress that the children must have felt as time passed by and I didn't arrive. Manipulating innocent children is evil. Edit the above was 12 years ago. Since then, I won a court order for the children to live with me because of their mum's behavior. It took almost 4 years, and she was given far too many warnings by children's services before they advised that I take it back to court, or they would. It was too late though, I think. The kids still saw their mum, and she was still doing the same. So another 2 years and another court order and all contact with kids and their mum was cut. The mum decided that course of action, rather than her receiving counseling. I was gutted, as were the kids, not that they knew any of the details. 18 months later, and I can see the kids changing, really wanting to see their mum of course. So I organized supervised contact between them all. This was okay for about 18 months when my daughter then decided to accuse me of strangulation. I was arrested, thrown in a cell for 9 hours, interviewed, charged, and then had to wait 10 months for my court appearance. Not guilty of course, but the kids were removed from my care after the allegation and given to their mum. I don't know whether the prior damage done by their mum caused this, or if it was related to the more recent contact which I'd arranged. I don't see my daughter now, but I do see my son and we get on really well. Life's a bitch sometimes. When I put together the story of what happened to me many years after I was raped, I learned that my rapist had punched and kicked me, an unconscious, defenseless and drugged 14-year girl, in the face and in the torso. He did this for absolutely no reason, just to be cruel and to feel powerful. I was unconscious and unable to fight, but he beat me very badly anyway. I wasn't awake to witness it, but I vividly remember the excruciating pain and not knowing how I got hurt back then, or why anyone would want to hurt me. I didn't know then that people could be so evil and so cruel. I do know now. Watched a patched biker pull a very heavy suitcase into a cabin in the woods and told everyone outside to not disturb them, he and his boss inside. This man had extremely wild eyes, but up until this incident I actually liked him. I got an nauseous feeling, just a palpable sense of evil, before I could even hear a sawzall running inside. I will never forget it, and I've never been close to having that feeling again. It was indescribable. I told some classmates that there was a bird nest inside a pole. Later, the pole was filled with stones. The bird baby is dead and a mother standing atop trying to get down into the pole. A co-worker came to work with COVID hoping to spread it simply because she was hoping to shut the whole place down to get 2 weeks off work. One of our employees was a 70-year-old cancer survivor. Edit the co-worker who came to work with COVID was fired. I don't know anything more than that though. Bauer kept quiet, and I don't work there anymore either. Different reason. My son's mom telling him at 6 years old she hates him and never wanted him, while he cried and screamed, "Please mommy, this isn't fair. I've never laid a finger on a woman." But to get past her to scoop my son up and leave the house with him, I pushed her that hard I'm shocked I didn't go to jail. To add to the pure evil, neither me or my son have seen his mom since. She's not filed to go to court, but gone and had another child with whoever was stupid enough to put 50p in the prat. Never seen my son happier, healthier and just all round better off without her in his life.